But I want us to shift gears on the second part, and I'm having a sit down this morning with Polycarp Omolo Ochilo. He is a former lecturer at the School of Journalism at the University of Nairobi, to talk about the role of the media in Kenya and what the media can be able to do in elevating leadership and governance, and also on matters democracy, and a lot that you're going to shed light on the role of the fourth estate in our country. Thank you, Mwalimu, for creating time for us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we're talking about the media this morning, and this is what has been described as the fourth estate. I just want you to talk to us about the pivotal role that you feel this institution ought to play in a democratic society such as this.
Thank you very much. I think the media has a very critical role to play in a country, particularly during election like today. And that is linked to what you have said, the fourth estate. The starting point why the media was called fourth estate is based on the British parliamentary tradition. At that time, there were three sections in Parliament. You had Lords Temporal, Lords Puritans, the Commons. Where the journalists sat was called the fourth estate realm in the system, according to Halton, who wrote that book on fourth estate. So during the formation of libertarian theory of the press, it was argued that the press is key for democracy as a fourth estate, because it has a broad theoretical framework to deal with complex issues, to deal with difficult issues, give them context. So that it does by knowing fully some of the key fundamental functions of the media beyond the provision of information, which is key unit of analysis. So I said, at election times like now, it is imperative that we ask, what is it that the media does as a watchdog role? Not as a cliche, but as a professional interpretation. What is it that the media should do in setting the national agenda? Not as a cliche, but serious professional discourse. What is it that the media does as a tool which is used as a device to maintain status quo in the context of development elections? For what is it that the media does as a tool capable of setting the agenda nationally and internationally? What does media do in terms of advocacy to deal with these issues? So it is key to that extent that we understand the role of the media. One of it is to set the agenda. So at an election time like now, professionals in media houses need to understand on a daily basis, how do they set the agenda in the context of governance, the context of democracy and elections? How do you institute fair play doctrine? Fair play meaning we have 4 presidential candidates who have been cleared by the Independent Electoral Commission. You need to give them equal airtime to follow the ethical provisions internationally. If you don't do that, then it means the media is creating an agenda which is biased, because the agenda setting means the media's capacity to influence what we think, to influence our perception. So if you have one party shown 4 times daily, 7 times a week, you are already giving perception that it is superior to the other parties that you don't give. These are the critical issues in relation to the function of the media. But doing that also requires that we understand their fundamental professional limitations. So important we understand that, but it is also important that the media gives policy reorientations in adopting techniques that is consistent with the demands of electoral systems as it is now. For example, at this time, the media must change writing styles from straight news reporting to interpretative reporting in the context of election, 2, explanatory reporting, 3, investigative reporting, 4, advocacy reporting, as a way of mitigating hostility, as a way of mitigating against misinformation, as a way of promoting public policy with the interest of the public people because of election demand.
Right. I want us to go step by step.
Yes.
And I must admit, I'm actually personally learning a lot as a stakeholder in this whole industry, in this critical season of election.
Very well.
Yes. But I just want to take you back on something you said there about fair play, the principle of fair play.
Yes.
And citing even an example of our country, Kenya, right now that we have 4 presidential candidates,
yes,
and why it is crucial to ensure that not just one candidate appears or gets covered more than the other 3. I just want you to address a concern that has been raised before with regards to what makes news at the end of the day. If you look at these 4 presidential candidates, an example one is having a political rally somewhere and another is probably in their office somewhere. If you're covering the day's news as a stakeholder in the media industry, who would you go for? What would you want to be part of the headline? Is it just about giving each and every candidate equal airtime, or there has to be value attached to that?
Well, you and me know that there are a number of yardsticks that we use for news judgment. Mm-hmm. Proximity, status, position that you have, mm-hmm, human interest, and others. So when you are going to cover electoral system like in Kenya now, you start with policy reorientations in the media houses. That policy reorientation requires that you discuss with media houses as a whole, but you discuss with political parties that given that we are an institution that serves the interests of the public, and our policy reorientation of fair play, we are going to give equal coverage for every political candidate for all political parties, your public rallies, or calling you to our studios. You must make sure that these political parties understand that. So there, you are actually zeroing in on news judgment based on status, mm-hmm, position of the politicians, who said what, the party candidate, etc., etc. Once you do that, they will comply because they want to reach their voters. Then it is known. You make that public. KBC would state that we are going to adopt a policy of fair play in the covering of election system in Kenya as given the policy that we are serving the public. Therefore, we do not want a skewed arrangement where we are misunderstood. So you share that with these parties and they know. So even if they are not having political rally now, tomorrow when they have, you start with them. But if you keep on starting with party A, run 3 footages, cutaways, then you bring party B, 3 footages, cutaways, third party, you have left the other 2 or the other one. What perception you are giving to the public is that these are the preferred parties, and given that the media has serious power in influencing what you think, yeah, in setting the agenda.
Do the players also have a role to play in securing airtime, in the media space, or it should just be granted?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
but the biggest problem that you and me must know is that very many people do not understand the functions of the media.
Yeah.
They just think it is a conveyor belt for their ideas and for promoting their image.
Yes.
The work of the media is serious than that. So when they don't know, you let them know. Mm-hmm. You let them know. There would be, say, times when you will give an airtime free. There would be a segment where you would have to pay, advocacy and advertising. If they know those and they don't take them, you are not blamed, because ethically and following professional ethics, you have actually provided equal airtime for the parties that are standing in election, and you have let them know and make that public. Okay? Then some you do commentaries, television and radio. The style of writing you must adopt now is called commentaries. You have leverage to do write-up in commentaries, get the voice narrators, the best one, do it in the studio. You are dealing with elections, all those parties. So when you give it the equal time, that is the message they get. They will come for it after that.
So in this crucial time, one thing I get from you is that the media should go beyond the he said, she said style of reporting, but it should be deeper than that.
Yes, you see, the interesting thing is that those discussions were discussed after World War II. In the United States, for example, that is when people started to argue that we cannot just have straight news per se. While those people who just wanted state news per se argued that that way you are not subjective, you are not injecting your opinions. But studies showed that time that viewers or listeners are interested in interpretation and backgrounding of stories done by professionally trained people. You give cause and effect of the story, and by so doing, you enrich the story, and people are able to understand more than straight writing. So that need to be adopted now, because election is complex, election is difficult, election is fraught with conflict. People need to know more, and it is diverse. If you zero in an electoral commission alone, you have to look at high level of preparedness. You have to look at technological advances that they are using. You have to look at the human resource that they are using. You have to look at logistics that they are using. You have to analyze the efficacy and the ability of those things to work as per schedule and consistent with the constitutional provision, as it were. Those will require people will write investigative stories. But sometimes you adopt what is called collective sanction. What that means, that in a week, say on Friday, all media houses must agree, a lead story, big issue. Then Standard writes an editorial on that. Nation writes an editorial on that. People write an editorial on that. Star writes an editorial on that. When you do that, you are reinforcing the centrality and the seriousness of these issues, and you are passing that to the viewers to understand more, because there is a lead story on the page, but there is also editorial. And when they find that that is what KBC also has done, a commentary on the same subject, which means media houses work in common to create synergy for the purpose, for the good of the society.
This interpretation, Mwalimu, should it come from, at some point, in certain instances, also come from an outside source? Because you're here trying to sustain the element of objectivity as a media house. Yes, you have this news, but going beyond to say what it means and what it may likely impact sometimes may get you to step on the wrong toes.
No.
Yeah.
Because in another definition, objectivity is actually, we use objectivity as a process of measuring the bounds of rationality. Rationality meaning you are fair, but it had its origins in the, say, Aristotelian tradition that they believe human beings are rational. So the media will promote rationality to the extent that you give them accurate information, adequate information, relevant information, and appropriate information. When you do that from your station or your people working in the institution, you cannot be accused of serious biases or that you are not objective, because you have backgrounded the story. You have provided empirical evidence to support your story. You have provided the interpretation required and the context. You may have interviewed somebody, or you interview so many people, and you have a piece which is investigative, interpretative, analytical, and backgrounded, putting things into context and elections. Things like peace, just simple word like that. But it is so deep if you give it into context what peace would do in an election year. Issues to do with justice, so deep on what justice will do during election. Issues to do with fairness is so big during an election. Issues to be satisfied that the media has dealt properly with the Independent Electoral Commission, that now people have faith in it, and they believe, because one role of the media is to demystify issues. It makes them simple. It makes them relevant and desirable for replication. When the media does that, you have a multiplier effect at national level, whereby now people really understand that this actually is what we should be doing.
All right, thank you for that, Mwalimu. Polycarp Omolo Ochilo, he's a former lecturer at the School of Journalism at the University of Nairobi. We are talking about the role of the media this particular morning, especially right now that we have just 41 days to the general election. What is it that the media can do to ensure that, you know, they not only inform members of the Fourth Estate, but also go beyond that to open their minds a little bit. We are coming back to continue that conversation. But of course, in studio, have been having a conversation this morning by Polycarp Ochilo. He's a former lecturer at the School of Journalism at the University of Nairobi. And before we continue with what we were discussing earlier, you've heard the governor there speak about some of the issues he has gone through, and also just a quick comment about what you've heard and how this is being also covered.
I think he's right from point of law because he's doing what is called due process. Due process meaning he's following the regulations and the laws of the country to ensure that final judgment is done on the basis of that, because that's why people go to court. You go to court to seek justice. So I think he has done the right thing. A problematic thing there is the comment that election is already rigged. This is dangerous comments because as a country, we are interested in a free, fair, credible, and verifiable elections. That is what IEBC wants to do. That is what the laws of Kenya provides. Therefore, to insinuate anything which you cannot justify, to provide evidence, it is dangerous because you begin to build discontent on the side. But otherwise, I think he's putting his case for due process so that justice is not only seen to be done, but it is done. And the courts have competencies to do that.
All right. So I just want us to go back to what we were discussing earlier. And I wanted us to look at the relationship between the role the media plays and what we call democracy, leadership, and governance. There is an interconnect. There's something that connects these three spheres. Talk to us a bit about how the media comes in and how they can be effective in serving this.
Yes. These issues are key. Election is about democracy, but elections are also about governance, or what people call good governance. Mm-hmm. And the fourth estate has an overarching role to deal with these key issues of democracy, of governance, so that people have context in terms of relevant information to make those decisions. From the point of view of Kenya, the media is already empowered by the Constitution to be free and independent editorially, to do what they think is professionally correct without any interference from any other quarter. If you read Article 33 of the Constitution, as read together with Article 34 of the Constitution, where the Constitution is categorical that apart from promotion of propaganda, violence, hate speech, and ethnic differences, the media is free to cover what they want without any interference. Then Article 35 discusses the centrality of information as a unit of analysis, because the media gives information in a generic form, but they are general information, they are specific information, personal information, political information, cultural information, economic information, mm-hmm. and technological information, as it were. So all these things become relevant for the media with that empowerment in hand from the law and the Constitution, mm-hmm. now to deal with governance. Governance has been defined by Gore and Hayden as regimes' management of their structures to enhance their legitimacy in the public realm. Implied in that definition is that a good governance presupposes that there is very harmonious relationship between the rulers and the ruled. There is synergy because the rulers work for the common good of the ruled. And you can only do that if you are transparent, accountable, mm-hmm. and open to allow people's participation. Democracy has been defined by the American president as the rule of the people, by the people, for the people before. But the contemporary definition is provided by Joseph Schumpeter. He argues that democracy provides us and governments with authority. Mm-hmm. The democratic process provides government with its purpose, why government is there. Democracy provides the due processes in which there is contestation for people to get power. What is happening now? Mm-hmm. Contestation and participation. So Schumpeter, like other scholars, have emphasized that the most important part of democracy is the empirical processes which provides room for contestation of politics through participation under fair and level playing structure to acquire power. So you see there is interconnectedness on the interface between the media, governance, and democracy, and the media playing overarching role to decipher most of these challenges in them. So when it comes to governance, a governance system which is undemocratic can only be taken to task with the media to analyze the extent to which it is undemocratic. For example, does it allow people fair play to participate? Does it respect the Bill of Rights of people? Does it respect the constitutional rights of people to be practiced? Does the process that government put in place during election provide fair play to ensure that people register for election, to ensure that politicians campaign, opposition and otherwise, in an atmosphere free of intimidation whatsoever, so that citizens have the capacity to make rational decisions, as Aristotle believed, that human beings are rational. You are only rational to the extent that you use adequate, accurate, appropriate and relevant information to make rational decisions. The reverse is that the case. If you don't have adequate, relevant, appropriate information, you make decision on the dark, it will be irrational.
All right. So how do you go about this, playing that role in a shrinked democratic space as the media, where freedom of the media, I believe, also ought to be shrinked at the same time? How do you hold the government accountable in such a scenario?
Yes, you see, the tool that we have is the Constitution. For a long time in this country, there was no unequivocal constitutional provision on the freedom of the media. This time, under Constitution of Kenya 2010, Article 33, Article 34 fundamentally, and Article 35 on the access of information, there is an equivocal provision that the media shall be free to determine their editorial content and what they have to cover at any particular time. That is the tool you use, notwithstanding that there are implied controls which are also done, because you see, one of the roles of the media is that they are used as a device to maintain status quo, which means the media is a component of the ruling power politique. Okay? So the ruling power politique has their interest, and the media has their interest. For example, the media produced in Nairobi, Nation, Daily Nation, Standard, they have interest in hitting the road in Kisumu every morning. They can only do that under peace and tranquility and security. The person in charge is President Uhuru, so they cannot take him off forever. There is overlap of interest which they must contain to do those things.
All right.
Yes.
I know we can have this conversation the whole day, but quite eye-opening, I must confess.
Thank you.
Just looking at the role of the media and how it can play that role professionally in this electioneering period. Of course, I've been having a sit-down with Polycarp Omolo Ochilo. He is a former lecturer at the School of Journalism at the University of Nairobi. Definitely a conversation that must continue. All right, so right now, that's how we wrap it up on News Check today. Thank you for creating time for us.